Hello friends, this is Growl. This video is going to be a bit different. I'm going to be going over my Battle for Azeroth in review. I saw Dratnos' video and I thought it was a great idea, so I'm going to copy it. I've been wanting to make a video about my history and just going over the expansion and how I started, and this is a great opportunity. So this is going to be a little bit different for most people's because Battle for Azeroth was actually my first World of Warcraft expansion. I played a little bit like 15 years ago for like a month, and I got to level 30 and I'm like, nah, this game isn't for me. But then in 2018 I was looking for something to play with my buds, and we ended up playing Bless Online. That game was not very good, and then we moved over to the new WoW expansion about a week in. And so I knew a few people, but none of us really had anything going on. None of us had characters, and this is how I worked up from nothing. So it's actually pretty funny that I have the most raid bosses defeated in Uldir after saying what I just said. So I'll go over a little bit about my guild history. So my first guild that I was in was one of my Bless Online friends had like a casual heroic raiding guild that just would take anyone. And obviously they were pretty nice to take in me because I like didn't even know how to use add-ons or anything. I was just figuring out the game. I remember a healer in that guild taught me how to use mouse over macros. He taught me about getting raid frames and, you know, always be casting spells and just the basics. My first character was a Resto Shaman, so it actually wasn't too hard to find guilds. I feel like Resto Shaman is a pretty good raid healer, but it's not as popular anywhere else. So a lot of people, like, there's not that many Resto Shamans looking for guilds compared to like Pallies or Dispriests. So I was in this heroic guild, and I didn't even understand the concept of raid time then. I'm just a really big degenerate, and I didn't understand the idea of like showing up at 5, playing for 3 hours, and quitting at 8 no matter what. And a couple weeks in, I'm just thinking like, we're so close to killing Gahoon, which on heroic, which was AOTC, and I'm just like, man, how does everyone just leave? How does everyone just leave and walk away from a boss like this when it's this close to dead? And I was just super tilted. Obviously, like, I just don't know what's going on. And then the next day I wake up, it was a Saturday, and I'm like, I'm gonna pug AOTC Gahoon. But the problem is I just don't know that much about the game, and also I don't have any logs or anything, right? So let's say I don't have the best selection of groups to be in, and I was pugging Gahoon for literally all day. It was over 12 hours. It was in total 107 pulls, and we eventually did it. And I'm like, oh yeah! And I was so proud of myself. I remember going back to raid the next week after that, and I'm like, I don't remember what I did, but I did something stupid to like show it off. Like, oh, look at me, I have AOTC, and they're like, oh, what are you doing? Like, are you raiding with another guild or whatever? I'm like, no, I pugged it, and I don't know, I was dumb back then. And eventually I just wasn't like, the guild was too casual for me. Not that they were bad, but I just like, I just want to raid a bunch and be better. And so I started searching out for a new guild. I was spamming in trade chat, and I found a guild that was on the first couple bosses, and they were like, hey, we need you. And I went with their first heroic run, and I just like slammed every boss. I was like super padding, like trying hard on parses, but because they had so much more damage and it was like a little bit better guild, we were just killing the bosses so much faster, and like all my parses were improving because of that. I thought I was like, God's gift to Resto Shaman at that point. But it didn't, it was just because the fight times were shorter. And then we go into mythic progression. I remember being in for almost every boss. The guild actually wasn't too bad. Like, for someone who was new to the game, like 1 month into the game, the guild was not that bad because we progressed from, they were on Zekvoss at the time when I joined, which was the 3rd boss, and we got all the way to Mithrax, which was the 7th boss. But the problem is the guild was having roster issues, and we started losing people, and instead of finding new people to recruit, we just kept recruiting more sub-rogues because we were on Zool at that point. So we get to Mithrax, and our roster has like 6 sub-rogues on it. And we're just like, oh no. So we have no hope of killing this boss because it was really melee unfriendly at the point. So then I start looking for another guild. and I'm shopping around. But at that point, I have a Mistweaver that I'm gearing up. So my plan was to just raid with 2 guilds, because at that point I wasn't really into Mythic Plus that much, and I was just looking for a new guild to raid on my Mistweaver, and I was planning on raiding on both. Eventually, I find one guild, but then I meet somebody that in that guild that I didn't know had played the game, and they directed me to another guild, which was my current guild actually already, which is Humble. And so at that point, I was raiding on Humble and my Mistweaver, and raiding in this other guild on my Resto Shaman. And the other guild barely managed to kill Mithrax with all the sub rogues because of some nerfs, and as soon as they killed Mithrax, the guild was just over. Like, they basically knew that there was no chance of killing Gahoon, and we just moved on. So I guess that went on a bit long, but oh well. That was the interesting part of the guild history. So BOD was like my first try hard raid tier, because I was like, oh man, Humble's, you know, a way better guild that I deserve to be in. I was playing Mistweaver for all of Prague, and I don't know, there's not really too much to say. That was when I eventually started playing Mythic Plus. At the very end of the season is when I started getting into Resto Druid, but for Season 2, I was almost entirely Mistweaver. Crucible of Storms was really, really hard. That was like a really hard raid tier. We had just barely finished it on the last week of Cutting Edge, but that week actually had, like, you had essences. Essences came out in the pre-patch before Eternal Palace, and so we actually killed Crucible of Storms with essences. So in my opinion, I don't think we got Cutting Edge in Crucible of Storms, but we did technically. Eternal Palace was, in my opinion, my least favorite raid tier. I think the fights just weren't that fun to heal. I think Orgazoa was really fun to heal. At that point, I was only playing Resto Shaman, which is whatever. I sort of got the idea in my head of, well, so my guild is improving, and I'm happy with my current guild, so let me just play whatever healer they want me to play, and then if I want to play something else in Mythic Plus, like, I have enough time to switch after progress. So during Eternal Palace, my lease for my apartment ran out, and a friend of mine, like, well, not really across the country. I moved from Michigan to Kansas City, and my friend was like, yo, just literally pack up all your stuff in your car and drive down here. And I'm like, okay. And that was like a pretty busy time for me. And at that point, we kind of knew that the last boss of Eternal Palace was a 3-heal fight. And I'm like, well, it'll be better to just bench me. So I actually wasn't in progress for Eternal Palace at all for the last boss. I just, like, showed up as a boomkin and just, like, got loot later on. And Nyalotha, I don't really know if there's too much to say here. Like, at this point, I'm, like, fully into Mythic Plus. Like, raiding is fun, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of, you know, it wasn't like, oh, this is magical or all these things happen. Like, it just sort of was, it was what it was. Here's our progress duration. You can see my progress duration for Eternal Palace is massive, because I didn't kill the boss. I was actually playing Classic WoW, so I did my whole move for like a week or two, but then by that point my guild was already fully progressed, so I was just playing Classic WoW after that. That was around that time, and I just showed up like months and months into the tier to get a staff, which I probably should have gotten earlier. But we already talked about guild stuff. Total Mythic Plus runs by season. Yeah, I really played a lot last season. Partly because streaming and my group allowed me to do that too. So Infested was the first season. I didn't know anything about Mythic Plus. So I'm actually surprised that I played so much Mythic Plus in Season 1. I don't know if Season 1 was longer, but I did not know anybody. Like, I was just slumming it with my boys and pugging, but over time, like towards the end of Season 1 and Season 2, it really overtook me as like, wow, this is a very fun thing to do. This is so fun, and I love Mythic Plus more than anything else, and like, not just this game, but like other games. You can see my plus 20 keys in upper 6. I spent you can see that I spent a lot of time in the trenches, like, learning. I did 250 keys below 9 or lower. That was me learning everything on my alts, on my mains. Like, let's see, what is my 2 to 9 here? Yeah, so the first season I did 250 keys 9 or lower. This season I did 30. This season I did 6, 12. I was in the trenches here. I was learning for 250. Let's see my in time: 66, 73, 80, 80. Okay, yeah, I was in the trenches in Season 1. I mean, that happens. It was my first month of playing the game. I think obviously my favorite 2 seasons were Awaken and Reaping. A lot of people like really, really loved Awaken. I think Reaping was pretty good too. I think Awaken was okay. The biggest problem that I had with Awaken was that it was like the same 4 obelisks the whole time. And I also didn't really like some of them, how they were designed. Like the Tank Buster one was really annoying because when tanks were under geared, it would just kill you in one hit. And so tanks would just have to like run away. And the fear guy felt really abusive too because you just like I don't really like unavoidable fears where your guy just like runs away and 2 of the 3 people are always going to get feared. A lot of people didn't have nice things to say about Infested. It's hard because this was my first season and I was such a noob. I feel like I don't really have a lot to say about Infested. Obviously it was frustrating, but I don't really, I don't really know much about what I could say about it. I'm an altaholic. I'm really not. I play like one class every season. So my first season was Resto Shaman, then my second season was Mistweaver, then my third season was Resto Druid, and my fourth season was gonna be Holy Paladin, and I'm like, I think Holy Paladin is gonna be good, I wanna play it, and I show up to the first push week and my tank is like, what are you doing? Get off that thing. And then my Holy Paladin went on the bench. I don't remember any. I think maybe, yeah, I sort of remember these. This was mainly just like me practicing or whatever. I remember when I was new, really early on, I thought it was a big deal to have off specs for raid because I was really scared of getting benched. So I remember, like, you can see my Mistweaver off specs that I was playing here and my Shaman off specs, but I did some bear keys, but like, yeah, very little. I had a Prot Warrior at some point too, but yeah, I gave up on it pretty quick. My Mythic Plus account scores. So this isn't entirely honest because as the season went on, it was easier to do higher keys. Like, so my season 1 score looks really bad, but it actually isn't too bad considering the highest keys people were doing were like 22s, whereas here people were doing like 30s. I think I was surprised at how high I finished these seasons 2 and 3 because I felt like our group wasn't as organized, but this is like pretty high. It's kind of hard to look at scores and say anything about it. All I'll say is I was pretty impressed with every season. Like every season there were some people ahead of me. I'm trying to remember who maybe we'll look at the healer leaderboards after. I know this video is really long already, but we can look at my runs after. Oh, my most run dungeons. So a lot of people ask me about my favorite dungeons and like what I like and what I don't like. Honestly, I just like really like variety. I think healers can relate a little bit. Like as a tank or a DP, like as a tank, you want to have like some cool route or like some dungeon where you're really comfortable in. Like I know Dorky really like Shrine and Motherlode. As a DPS, you just want to do like really big pulls. But as a healer, it's more about just the challenges. So I don't really have like favorite. Like my group really did not like Temple and King's Rest, and it's no surprise to see them here as the fewest 2 dungeons that we run. We would like just avoid these dungeons even though I didn't mind them that much. The mecha guns just got added earlier. Let's see if there's any outliers. I think Ataldazar was deceptively hard. You can see my in time here is above 80 for all these, and then it gets into Ataldazar. Shrine, so Shrine was nerfed at the end of season 1, I think. Shrine was really, really hard at the beginning. All of the blobs gave on death affixes and the timer was shorter, so this was a really, really hard dungeon. Shrine was my least favorite dungeon for a long time, which is funny because I played Resto Shaman in season 1 and that was like not a bad healer for that. Siege was by far my least favorite dungeon for a while too. I scuffed a lot of Siege keys. It's funny to see Siege as my least in time. The other funny thing about it is I think Siege, no one wants to do it again. Like, the thing is these are only finished keys. So, like, Freehold, Underrot, Toldagor, for example, look like they're really hard. Or look like they're really easy, but that's mainly because if you deplete one of those, you just walk out and do the lower key. Whereas, if you're doing Siege, no one wants to do Siege or King's Rest. So, if you deplete it, you just walk out. Or you just finish it, or you walk out and you don't come back. My Mythic Plus buddies. This is really cool. So a lot of people will know the other ones, but not actually this squad right here. I actually just played with all these guys. Well, except for Toxic, but I still talked to him too. So these were my friends that I came to the game with. 2 of the 4. So these were the guys that really enjoyed Mythic Plus and played with me a lot. So Squeeve and Squeeve DH are obviously the same person, and then Broken Dagger and Hog are the same person. They initially started as Rogue Mage or Rogue DH, and then they switched to Mage DH or something. I don't remember exactly, but either way, those are their 2 characters, and they both switched at some point. So my very first like quote unquote push group that you could call it was Toxic was tanking. Then Broken and Squeeve, and then we would just pug a 4th. Usually we didn't really have a 4th that we would get. Broken played Rogue at some point. I think Broken was like, so Broken's like a super good friend of mine, and I think he would have took to Rogue really well, but it's just hard to play Rogue in Mythic Plus when you're not that familiar with the game, because there's so much things that you need to have to do, you know? Like, you need to know how to shroud stuff and like how to skip stuff, and like, not that we were doing a ton of that, but it's really overwhelming for a newer player to have to learn like all those things in dungeons that rogues have to do. So I kind of wonder, like, both of these guys own, and I think that if they would have kept playing with me, they would also be top players by now. Like, I'm almost undoubtedly. So I guess this is the story of how I met Dorky. So one of the other people that I came to the game with, his name was Sawa. I met him through Bless Online, and the very first week of the Mythic Plus, I was doing keys with Sawa, and he said, look, I have this tank, he's really good, and he'll help you get a +10, because for me, getting a +10 on the first week was like impossible. It took me weeks to be able to do it +10, and he invites this guy named Dorky. He's a Blood DK, and we're doing an Ataldazar 10, and that was my first time playing Infested. I didn't even know what Infested was, because they were on 10 keys or higher, and I don't remember exactly what happens. All I remember is we wipe to the pack before Priestess, and Dorky's just like CBA, and he just quits out of the key. And I'm just like, I mean, I felt lucky because I was even in the key, but at the time it was like, man, like that was my +10 key. Maybe I am hopeless, you know? And that was my first experience with Dorky, but at that point he was a lot better than me, and he was probably playing beta and stuff. He had played a lot of Legion Mythic Plus, and I didn't really talk to him much or interface with him much again. Like, I didn't have, like, there's no way I would add him. He was way better than me, you know? And then in Season 2, I was getting really addicted and, like, really into pugging. I was pugging in the higher ends of Group Finder, and then I ran into him again in Group Finder. I played with Dorky, I played with Pretzel, and a guy named Ricky Tien, who I haven't seen him around lately, but he played with Henry, that warrior in Season 2, and then they both quit to play Classic or do some other stuff. So anyway, I ran into Dorky again, and Dorky's like, oh, like, you're Sawa's friend. And my opinion of Dorky at that time was like, this guy, like, he's so good, and he hates people who are bad. And I remember trying so hard, and then I don't know, eventually it got to the point where, like, I played with Dorky a few times, and he was just like super nice, and like I don't know even what was going on, but either way, my first impression of him was like not right. So this was the squad. So the squad before Dorky, while I was hanging out with Dorky a little bit and pugging, I had another squad that was Zerk Sizzle, who played Hunter, someone named Dr. Hotz, who was also a bear tank, ironically, and that was really it. We played with Buell on Rogue a little bit, but he was like not always with us. So it was me, me as a Mistweaver, a bear tank, and a BM hunter, and we would just pug too. And we got pretty high to like 20s and 22 keys, and then we kind of got stuck because we didn't have we were just pugging random people all the time. Like, yeah, we definitely could have gotten better, but. And then that's when so we were pugging sometimes, and that's when I ended up playing with Dorky, and then we ended up playing more with him. On the Wing he was the guy who I ran into when I was I don't want to say guild hopping, but he was my buddy who found me, and he was like, oh, you should not go to this guild, you should join Humble. So he was actually the one that hooked me up into Humble, and I did a lot of keys with him. This is like probably a lot of sales and like other stuff, because I don't remember doing too many push keys with him. I think maybe he was tanking at this point. I don't remember exactly what we did with him, but we definitely played a lot that season. And then Didex was the main tank that played with Dorky, because at that time Blood DK had gotten nerfed, and Didex was playing tank for them, and Dorky was playing Unholy. And Cray was the rogue too. Cray was raiding in Blood Legion, and he was playing with Dorky as well. So the Dorky squad was like Dorky, Cray, Didex, a Windwalker named Weedfist. There was a Fury Warrior in there named Drunken Yoon, and it was just kind of like, it wasn't really like a set squad. It was just whoever's on when we game. They also had another healer too. I was like their bench healer at this point. I was just like, so I would play some with Dr. Hots, I would play some with Dorky when their healer wasn't around, and I was just like kind of a bench main. This season, like the end of season 2 was like sort of where the bench meme came from, at least in my mind, because I just got the idea that, well, you get to a point where sometimes, you know, you can't always do plus 24 keys. Like sometimes you just have to sit on the bench and wait. Like you can either pug and practice, or you can just get on the bench and like be proud of it. So that's sort of what I was doing there. And then season 3 was, I was like pretty much in the Dorky squad at that point. So the Dorky squad was again me, Dorky, Didex, Prey, and then some other people, Drunken, Weedfist. Some of them quit like during the season. This is like towards the end of the season is where we brought Junkrat in. I don't know. I didn't know Junkrat at all before then. Dorky was his buddy, and Tomobor is Dorky's bear. So we played. So Didex had a pretty busy work schedule. Well, let's rephrase. Didex had a normal person work schedule, and all of us were degenerates who played 12 hours a day. So we would do like bear keys by morning or like really late night, and then like after dinner, like the normal people play time would be when we play with like Didex, and that would be sort of the main squad. But eventually it got to the point where we were just doing so many bear keys because we were playing like 12 hours a day, and we were just like, the bear keys are actually like going pretty well. Like, well, it sort of got to the point where we felt like we could do better with the bear key squad with with Dorky tanking, just because Dorky is such a good tank. That we're like, well, what if we just do this all the time? And I think Psycho comes in at the end of the season 2. This is when Psycho and some of the Alliance boys swap to Horde, but that was like later on in the season. That's why they don't show up here. And this is the official squad right here. We played a lot together throughout the whole season. This was, we played with a few people in the 5th slot. We didn't have a mage for a while. I don't remember if Cray was still around at the beginning of this season, but we played with a lot of people in the 5th slot because we didn't have someone who played mage, and eventually we got Chow, and so this was the squad, and then Dorky would switch sometimes to play Unholy. Yeah. There's not really much, you know, we picked up Psycho at the end of season 3. We picked up Chow. Like, both of those, they were both the same issues where we just needed those classes. Like, you saw our group before, we had like Windwalker, Unholy, or whatever. We needed a Demon Hunter and we needed a Mage. So when Psycho transferred over, we just like jumped on him immediately because he didn't have a squad because he had just switched from Alliance. And we were looking for a Mage for a long time, and Dorky actually started, and we were playing with Folk, who played a little bit of Mage and a little bit of Shadow Priest. That was like the late night bear squad was Folk on Shadow Priest instead of Mage. And we ended up getting Chow because, well, obviously he was really geared and he raided and stuff and he's good, but also Dorky said that he was the only mage that carried Battle Shout scrolls. He saw Chow Battle Shout scroll one time and he's like, he fell in love. It was love at true sight. So if you're a mage out there and you're trying to find a group, carry Battle Shout scrolls. Oh, that's it. That is the end of the year in review. Hold on, can I do this? I want to look at the healers real quick. Since this video is already way too long anyway, we'll just, I want to look at the top healers for all the seasons and just maybe talk about them. I think people might like that. Spec leaderboards. No, class leaderboard. Okay. So I didn't know that much about season 1. I was like a noob. You'll never find me here. So I remember I used to watch a lot of Gatya, who was playing Mistweaver at this point. And this is like towards the end of the season is when I started learning that I like Mythic Plus, and I was watching people. So I watched a lot of Gatya. He didn't stream too much, but I learned a lot from him. Obviously, J.B's up here. Edelweiss is up here. Rest in peace. I don't know where she went. I see her pop around in Discords. Jamal was really good too, because Jamal was playing with Trell at that point. That was like Jamal, Trell, Evade. That group ended up breaking up, but that was a really, really good group. Yeah, no, I don't remember a whole. I didn't really pay that much attention in season 1. So then we get into season 2, and this is when I start learning Resto Druid, and Zamok was like the number 1 healer, and he was really, really good. So I would watch him a ton. Sorry about that. I would watch a ton of Zamok, and I watched a lot of Furo too. I would say I learned the most in this season from Zamok, Furo. I watched Gigabob a little bit, and I watched a lot of J.B too. And Zerk just like appeared for one season and disappeared. He was playing with Ricky Tien and um Henry Tatterchun, that was his name. I can't remember his name. And Ellesmere made an appearance here too. This is when the Resto Druid takeover really happened. In season 2, it was especially bad in season 2 because healer power of holy paladins wasn't strong and bosses were still hard, and so it felt like you couldn't heal hard bosses. Like, you just like these bosses, these like 23 temples and like really high TDs, you just couldn't even heal these with like Mistweaver or Dispriest back then. It just, I mean, maybe you could, but people just weren't good enough. But it didn't seem possible. So I actually made an appearance. I'm pretty surprised that I made it this high. I think this was like the dorky squad, and just I don't know if we got some good runs of keys. I don't remember a whole lot. One thing I do remember is that I had a depleted 22 KR, 23 KR for the whole season. I was like the only person in anywhere that didn't have a time 22 KR. I remember one short story about KR is I was playing with Nerf Tank and J Funk on the very last day of the season, and I'm like, we get a 23 KR, and I'm like, damn, these guys own, we can definitely do this. But like, they don't care because they already have a 23 KR, and they were just like griefing and not really trying, and I was just like so tilted, and we depleted it on the very last day of the season, and I would have jumped up at least like 1 or 2 spots. I remember thinking that if I jumped up past Gigabob, I'd be happy because that guy completely owns, and I learned a lot from him, so it would be funny if I passed him. So then we get into season 3. Zerk is gone. I think Furo might be gone here too. Man, is this really gonna do this? I'm trying to talk about BFA, and then it's just gonna lag out. This would be the worst end of the video. Alright, we give it one more try. We give it one. Maybe we'll go season 4. Maybe this season is bugged. Okay, we're here. Okay, so Gigabob is up here. This was like 4K was the dream. I remember these guys got 4K at the very last week, and they were hype about this. This is where NA really started to die off. So you have Jamaa. This was still Trell's group, I believe. But like, that was it. The main, like, all of the big NA groups were gone. So J.B at that point, like, his squad was not caring as much about live keys. So I think he was playing with like Trance or just whoever would play because he still wanted to. There was Displacers in the Alliance boys, but they ended up like, some of them left towards the end of the season. So at some points I feel like I don't know if I really had to rise to fame or if just everyone else had me quit. That's kind of what it feels like sometimes. But yeah, this is where everybody oh, there was Ellesmere's team too. I don't remember. This was Red, Ellesmere, Billy. Was Billy playing in season 3? I don't know. Yeah, this was when NA really started to feel sad. Well, because this season 3 was, I think, the worst affix of the expansion. So it's no surprise that a lot of Mythic Plus players left here. It was just kind of sad because I think season 4 was really good. So yeah, I mean, all these guys own. You can see it's like mostly the same people. This is when Zmok switched to Paladin at the very end of the season. I mean, he's always been a Paladin, man. He wanted to do it, so it's actually, this is really cool to see two of us back in the top 5 healers world. And then we look at the last season. Yeah, I had a feeling this would happen. I'm sorry for the flashbang. All right, well, I don't want to sit here and go through technical difficulties. Y'all know what happened in season 4, but this is a little bit different of a video. If you enjoyed it, let me know. Although there probably won't be too many things like this. This was sort of a one-off. But anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you guys dig through your Battle for Azeroth in review to go find your old friends and stuff. I don't know if this is available on Raider.io yet. They were like testing it with some people, but it should be available, if it's not now, very soon. But anyway, thanks for watching, friends. Happy keying.